you all to the next book discussion in the series IHC Conversations with Authors, that is presented by the Habitat Library and Research Center, India Habitat Center, on a very important subject on the book Rising Ambition, Carving New Pathways, India's Energy Transition, authored by Sri Ajay Shankar. On behalf of India Habitat Center, we extend a very warm welcome to the author for the evening, Sri Ajay Shankar, a distinguished fellow with TERI. Sri Ajay Shankar will be in conversation with Sri Gireesh Pradhan, the former chairman of the Central Electricity Regulatory Committee, CERC, and the former secretary of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. We welcome Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, who will be chairing today's discussion. Thank you. Before we move to the main program, which we are sure it will be very insightful book discussion, I would like to introduce our author, discussant, and chair for the evening. Our author for the evening, Sri Ajay Shankar, has had rich experience in policy making in energy and industry. He served for over 7 years in the Power Ministry and had a key responsibility for the Electricity Act 2003, from its conception to enactment to notification of the rules and policies under it and initiating its implementation. The competitive bidding guidelines for power procurement were prepared and used for the successful bidding for the ultra-mega power projects under his stewardship. This paved the way for competitive power procurement in the country. He played a major role in the design of the National Village Electrification Program, which led ultimately to the completion of the village and household electrification in the country. He also played a major role in the design of the National Solar Mission. He has been writing extensively on the policy issues. His book, The Rising Ambition, India's Energy Transition, which is being featured in today's discussion, it has just been published by TERI. We welcome Sri Gireesh Pradhan, who will be in conversation with Sri Ajay Shankar. Sri Gireesh Pradhan joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1977. He was in the Maharashtra cadre. He served at the district level in a number of districts in Maharashtra. He has served as a member of the Maharashtra State Electricity Board, and he was Municipal Commissioner of Pune Municipal Corporation, and further as the Director General of the Civil Services Training Institute, Yashoda, Pune. He has served in the Ministry of Food and Civil Supplies, Home Affairs, Power and Renewable Energy. Besides this, he was the Principal Secretary to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha and Joint Secretary to the President of India. Besides closely handling the areas of transmission, energy efficiency, climate change, planning and coordination, Sri Pradhan has served as the chairman of the Damodar Valley Corporation, and he has been associated with the rollout of the Electricity Act 2003, contributing to the policies which followed in the wake of the Act. Sri Pradhan was appointed as the chairman CERC in 2013, and he served in that position for 4.5 years. In the year 2021, the Ministry of Power, Government of India, appointed him as the chairman of a high-powered committee to suggest a draft national electricity policy. Thank you, sir. We warmly welcome Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, who will be chairing today's book discussion. I request all of them to please come to the dais, then I will further introduce. Thank you, sir. Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh is a distinguished media leader, journalist, and academician. With over 3 decades of extensive and distinguished experience in journalism, academia, and media leadership, Professor K.G. Suresh has made significant contributions to media education and communication policy in India. He has served as the Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi, National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal, and as the Director General of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, IIMC, New Delhi, where he made transformational impact. A visionary institution builder, he played a pivotal role in obtaining deemed to be university status for IIMC, establishing permanent campuses of both Makhanlal Chaturvedi University and IIMC across India, and launching journalism programs in multiple Indian languages such as Hindi, Marathi, Malayalam, Sanskrit, and Urdu. In the media industry, he has held senior editorial roles, including senior consulting editor at Doordarshan News and editorial consultant at Asianet News. A TEDx speaker, faculty member at Henry Stewart Talks, UK, and a member of several UGC expert panels and national academic bodies, he has also represented India globally with professional engagements across Afghanistan, Bangladesh, China, Japan, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Israel, and other countries. A jury member for the National Film Awards, Ramnath Goenka Awards, and Ladli Media Awards, he has been widely recognized for his professional excellence and was honored with the Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Award by the Government of India for his outstanding contribution to journalism. Thank you, sir, for your valuable presence here today. May I now request Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh to kindly take forward this book discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bhavna.
Thank you, sir.
A very good evening to all of you. I'm really, glad to see, such a distinguished audience here. There were concerns in our program department because we are right now screening Sholay next door. So whether Sholay would attract more eyeballs, but I'm really glad that, because this is also a Sholay of a different kind of energy that we are going to talk about. And I'm really glad that all of you have turned up. Thank you so much. I don't want to come in between I was actually looking for a very appropriate word, how to describe, all the designations that have been held, that's fine. But how to describe these two gentlemen? And I found it within the book itself. Like they say that the solution is within the problem itself. So I think that I was reading Suman Berry's, his description of this book. And he has used a very lovely term, which I loved it. And that's administrative scholars. And both of them come with, tons of experience in administration, yet at the same time, they have thought through it, they have gone deep into the issues and tried to look at it from a policy perspective and with a farsightedness which is very rare to see. I've been privileged to go through this book, and I, honestly speaking, found that this is not a textbook just for the experts, which is very rare. Usually, these kind of books, generally appeal to the policymakers, to those who are into it. But this is something, even for a layman, I would say in this particular subject, though I am a layman, it really appealed to me because it comes with, not only in terms of simplicity of language, but also in terms of explaining. Even, say, the basics of solar power has been explained. The data, that kind of data analytics that has gone into it, the detailed, the graphic picture that has been given, that's simply, for me, it was an eye-opener. And I felt that this is something that not only people related to this domain, but also public at large should be reading. And I think that this IHC conversation with authors is basically an initiative aimed at understanding, the nuances, what the author wanted to write, what is his objective, and there are many unsaid things also. There are many things which we need to understand between the lines. And I felt that perhaps two of the finest scholars in this domain are today with us. I don't want to come between both of them, except that physically I would be there between them. And I request Shri Gireesh Pradhan ji to start the proceedings. It would be a Q&A sort of thing, which would be followed by a question answer session. The floor would be open to the audience. So over to you, Mr. Pradhan.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Suresh. And thanks to Habitat for giving me this opportunity to be present at probably one of the most interesting and learning experiences that lab. Mr. Ajay Shankar has been my senior colleague. We have had the privilege of knowing each other for over 2 decades. We worked closely in the ministry as well as outside the ministry. I just want to start the ball rolling by giving a piece of advice to those who have not yet picked up this book. Of course, Professor Suresh, being a professor, would not find it very difficult to go through the book. He is used to these things. For others who get attracted by the size of this book and the very enticing cover, let me forewarn you, it's a tough read. Believe you me, it's a tough read. It takes time. Many of the portions need to be read over and over again to understand. And I'm saying this having had the dubious distinction and privilege of having been in the sector. But be that as it may, let me start the ball rolling by firing the first question, sir, with your permission. So the book shows tremendous confidence and confident optimism permeating throughout that book. Now, what is the basis of that? If you could elucidate right in the beginning, that would be nice. Second, I'll give you a supplement. Would it be said after many years that this was the point of policy inflection as far as India's energy transition was concerned? Would that be correct? So these two questions I thought I'd pose to you, sir. Thank you.
The title of the book is Rising Ambition. And the first two chapters of the book talk about the extraordinary success that we have achieved in this century. Chapter 1 talks about how we were able to take electricity to all households in this country starting in 2005 by 2020, and which the International Energy Agency describes as historically unprecedented, that we took electricity to 700 million homes. So that success leads to confidence, and confidence leads to ambition. The second chapter talks about our extraordinary success with the solar mission. You were one of the people in the driving seat, and so is my friend Deepak Gupta here. And both of you would recall that when we began, none of us thought that we'd get this far so soon. So that again gives greater confidence and therefore more ambition. Now, both these chapters also describe that our program design and our policy was evolved by ourselves. Neither of these achievements owes anything to any international consultant or the World Bank or the ADB. So since we crafted our own solutions, and that's why the phrase carving new pathways, so that gives me confidence that if we get our act together right, get the right policies, the right incentives, we can achieve wonders. So the confidence and optimism in the rest of the book is based on actually achievements of the sector and the demonstration of state capacity, both in terms of getting policies right and implementing them. The remaining chapters of the book are prescriptive, and as you rightly said, that it's a bit dense because it's prescriptive. So to answer to your second question, I would say my intention is writing the book is that this is the first book of its kind which talks holistically about India's journey to net zero. Now, Prime Minister Modi ji displayed climate leadership in Glasgow when he announced we will become net zero by 2070. And so far, all the discussion has been on the intermediate goals of achieving 500 GW of fossil fuel capacity or energy efficiency. I thought this is now the time to begin thinking about and discussing the more difficult journey to net zero. The optimism in the book is mine, and I believe it, though I may not be around in 2070. But the optimism is there that India today has the capacities in management, in skill, in thought, and so on and so forth, to actually leapfrog to the global frontier. And the analogy which is there in my mind, which I have not referred to in the book, is that India has already seen that leapfrogging, where the vast majority of people in this country have never seen a landline. And the vast majority of the country is discovering broadband and the internet through the smartphone. So can we not do the same thing in terms of moving to a fossil fuel-free economy? And the book is prescriptive about how to think about it, how to get there. And the underlying premise is that it is state leadership and state policy and smart policies which will get us there. And I believe we are capable of getting there, and there are lots of suggestions in the book, and I'd be happy to get a lively debate on each specific suggestion or idea in individual discussions. And my request to each one of you is, please go through it and tell me where you think I could have written differently or said something else, or have not said something which should have been said. But my aim in writing this book is the Indian audience. And it is entirely about our potential journey, though I do believe that this has relevance for the rest of the world because we are a developing country. So whatever we do and wherever we succeed becomes an example for everybody else. And I have added towards the end, in the last two chapters, that how we can look at the entire journey. So the entire journey has, according to me, three kind of pillars. So one is, how do we make electricity carbon emission free? Now I believe that we have reached a point where we can meet all additional demand without new thermal power plants. It's a debatable point, but I've made the case here. The second is, how do I electrify as much of the economy as possible? So carbon-free electricity drives economic activity. And the third pillar is where fossil fuels cannot be substituted by electricity, what do we do? And here we have, Prime Minister Modi has shown leadership in launching the hydrogen mission. So we are on the global frontier at par with everybody else, including the advanced economies, on the use of green hydrogen. So that's why there is this optimism in the book. As far as this being an inflection point, I'd like to believe that it will generate the debate and the discussion which will make India succeed, and succeed faster and better and at lower cost.
So you do agree? You do agree that it will be regarded as an inflection point in the future?
I would like you to wish that.
That is Mr. Ajay Shankar. So the other thing is that you and I have both been associated with the climate change negotiations over the years. Both of us were together on that. And there was a stated position that India held. And there were arguments that India gave when we went in for climate change negotiations. Although you don't refer to it directly, but I get the feeling, having read your book, that is all behind us now. We are not going to use those arguments, or at least we are going to put them on the slow burner. And we have taken up this path to energy transition, striking out on our own and doing it with the confidence that you just narrated, which the country has. Is that a correct interpretation of?
The starting point of the analysis in the book is Prime Minister's announcement that we will become net zero by 2060.
Yes.
And India has always sincerely tried to implement its international commitments. We have been conservative in making commitments, we've been cautious, but whenever we have made commitments, we have had every intention of keeping it. So I take it that way. As far as the climate change negotiations are concerned, the book is silent about it, it's purely India-centric. But two propositions are emerged from experience of the last few decades. that unfortunately the rich countries of the world are psychologically feeling poor. And the second is that the hope of money flowing in from governments is unlikely to be fulfilled, but the international system has more than enough cash floating around. And the book makes the case that if you get policies right, finance is not a constraint. And the second point which we have been arguing for is technology transfer. That again is a mirage we have been pursuing. Technologies are owned by private firms. Technologies are developed by private firms, and there's a market for technology. Given the size of India's market, any technology is available to us. It's up to us to negotiate the right terms and create the right market signals. So this is an India-centric book focused entirely on how, at the least cost, to achieve our commitment to become net zero. And the other argument I make in the book is that the effort to achieve this will facilitate our becoming developed country and becoming Viksit Bharat. So technology development and costs have brought us to a point where there is no contradiction between development and moving towards net zero. And that's a very major point I make in the book.
So, of course, you do mention that you are not going to, or you have not gone into the cost aspects of it. In fact, the line is there are no headline on the cost aspect. So, do I take it that we are not very clear about which direction the costs are? I mean, after all, we are going in for a hydrogen economy in a large way. We're going in for so much of storage, which is PSP based. I mean, these are large, or the other grid scale batteries. Now, all these are going to, I'm just giving you an example, are going to cost a lot of money. You yourself refer to it at some place that the costs may be high, but they're worth undertaking. How do you look? I'm not asking you for a cost figure, but I thought, as you mentioned, least cost has to be compared with something else. So could we,
So let me try and give you a sense of the numbers that are in the book. So as far as electricity is concerned, there is clarity about costs. Because tenders are coming out for battery storage, there are cost estimates for pump storage, and as I said earlier, and it's given clearly in this book on page 124, and the numbers since the book was written have become better because recent tender prices are lower. So the cost of electricity from solar power with storage is cheaper than the cost of new thermal power. Now, this is a major inflection point in terms of costs. It has not yet sunk into the system. It will be assimilated over the coming weeks and months, I hope. The caveat is that if you are creating 1,000 megawatts of solar power, you need to create 12 to 1,300 megawatts of storage, because 20% is lost. So that scale on storage is the new frontier. But if that is achieved, then the consumer will have to pay less for electricity if we move away from thermal power. Now, I'm making a very serious statement. So if we stop building new thermal power plants and build storage, enough storage, then the consumer will have to pay less because the cost of electricity will come down. So as far as this is concerned, costs are very clear. The second area of costs is where electricity is used in other sectors. So the biggest sector is transport. Now the railways have already discovered that using electricity is cheaper than using diesel. So railways have almost completed electrification. They've taken a long time to discover this, unfortunately. And now we had the big tender for city buses. The discovered price is that the cost per kilometer is lower than the cost of diesel. So India is on the global frontier in terms of switching over to electric mobility. And I have been personally using an electric vehicle for 3.5 years. My cost per kilometer is 1 rupee. Now, no petrol or diesel car will give you anything near that. And I've recovered my extra capital cost about a year and a half back. So costs are very clear here. Now, where costs are not clear is in the hard-to-abate sector, the hydrogen economy. But our costs are not going to be higher than that of anybody else in the world. So we are globally competitive. The whole world has to make the transition. We have to make the transition. So it's a level playing field. The argument that I've made in the book, and is the important one, is that the only way to discover the cost is by actually putting up a plant using green hydrogen to make green fertilizer or green steel. I mean, do you recall when you got the solar mission going, Deepak and you, we thought it will be 17 rupees a unit. Competition and bids gave us 12 rupees in the first year. And then it kept going down. And I remember those days, the very prolonged arguments by people who said, competitive bidding will not work, this will be a stillborn program, there will be no investors, so on and so forth. There were long arguments, but the power of competition in an economy which is integrated with the global economy in terms of access to technology, skills, and capital is underestimated in our country. Then I would make even a stronger point that many of the MNRE programs have not succeeded because the initial design was based on a subsidy, based on an assessment of capital cost. So there's no incentive to reduce costs. So my recommendation in the book is have one tender for a green steel plant, which is as good as the best in the world, ideally zero carbon emission. One tender for fertilizer, one tender for cement. Whatever the extra cost, the government can easily absorb it because you look at whatever 90,000 crores we've committed under PLI and all these other programs. So the cost of one project can be easily absorbed by the government. And I have argued that when that project is completed, and there's no way any of these projects will get completed before 2030 if we tender today. So once these are completed, then you have an idea of costs. Then you have an idea of relative costs. You have an idea of in which segment, if you move in a direction, the per capita emission of India will go down faster than in another sector. You can then take a call as to where the rest of the world is moving. You can also today take a call that you will subsidize industry to the extent required to create green manufacturing capacity so that we become CBM compliant. So in the global market, the potential for increasing our market share in Europe is very high. Because if you look at it in just first principles, China, which is supplying everything to Europe, will need to close a plant and make a new green plant. We have to only make a new green plant. And the cost of closure plus a new plant is higher than the cost of a green plant alone. But that is if we choose to work with industry, give them the requisite finances, subsidies if required, to create manufacturing capacities and products with low embedded carbon. We can do it. Some Indian firms are already trying to do it on their own. And we can also tweak the regulatory system to make it easier for Indian firms to go there. So we have already created a system where it is very easy for a new arc steel plant to be put up, which will get real-time carbon-free electricity. And this will meet the highest standards of having low embedded carbon in the world. Similarly, all kinds of other firms which may want to have low embedded carbon can be given round-the-clock green electricity. Many of them are going in for captive supply of green electricity, but the DISCOMs can also choose to say that there is a separate tariff for you, and we will give you round-the-clock green electricity. And if that system comes into place, the DISCOMs will be inviting bids for storage to meet this obligation. So I believe that the costs in the hard-to-abate sectors would begin emerging realistically by in the 30s, early 30s. If they do, then you are well positioned to, be on as far ahead or as much on the global frontier as any other economy which is moving rapidly towards becoming a green economy, whether it's California or Germany. Because what we do need to accept is that our costs today are lower. And our solar tariffs are the lowest in the world. Why? Because capacities have emerged where we take advantage of our lower wage costs and better management capacities in the private sector. That's what gives me the optimism.
I want to shift now to the wind And what interests me was the argument that you have laid out quite well in terms of repowering. That's an area which is really showing great promise. But that will not take place unless you give some kind of support. Now, I know subsidy for you is not a great way to go, but I have a feeling that repowering to the scale that you have mentioned, which is I think 1,163 gigawatts, which would be the potential if we go up to 150 meters or things like that. That would not be possible unless some kind of support is given by government. One. The second thing about bidding, sir, competitive bidding, what you referred to, is that developers tend to bid very aggressively in terms of trying to corner the market. That's one. The second is we've seen in the recent past, states have a problem with the bidding route, because neighboring states, even if they get marginally less prices, they tend to scrap whatever tender they had put out, and then it becomes a mess. So every time and under all circumstances, the competitive bidding route may not work. That's my second point.
So let me respond to the second one first. So if I look at the aggregate experience of the renewable energy sector, I think we can take legitimate pride that state after state entered into contracts for solar power at 12 rupees, 10 rupees, 8 rupees, and have by and large been paying those rates, though the price for a new bid will be 2.5, 3 rupees. And in spite of all the noises about cancelling contracts or renegotiating them, again, if one looks at the aggregate picture, it's pretty good. And I believe, because sometimes it's political changes in the government. The last government gave the contract, I think they did something not right, so I will cancel it. That is happening across sectors. But if I take the macro picture in the country, the record is pretty good. And here the central government has to be very firm in making it clear that there is a sanctity of a contract. So unless you establish something terribly wrong in one case, there is no legitimacy in cancelling a contract. And the other thing which we have to accept is that we were very lucky to see all prices falling. But prices never fall all the time. They can go up because our rupee has depreciated. The international system, things may happen, well, the prices will go up. But even if they go up, the present levels are so low that we can easily live with higher prices. And if some developer builds aggressively, and if the contracts are sound, then he will lose the money, or those who financed him will lose money. Because the buyer pays only for what he gets. So the DISCOM loses nothing if a developer is over-aggressive. So that's my take on competitive bidding, and I think that is the way to go forward. The fact is that all incumbents believe competitive bidding is a terrible idea. I must come and persuade you of this cost. I must persuade you that my technology is the best in the world and you should pay more and more. But I believe that should happen in the rarest of rare cases across the sectors of the economy. On wind repowering, what I have suggested is a little bit unorthodox, which is that a state government should set up an SPV which will buy out all the contracts of the wind farms which have been put up 20 years back with old technology, and the owner is assured the same cash flow and stream of revenue for the life of the contract. So this SPV buys out something. Then the SPV, which is state-owned and state-funded and is given only working capital or maybe some subsidy depending on what costs turn out to be, then that SPV repowers and puts up a new turbine at a site by again inviting competitive bids, not doing it itself. So it's a kind of aggregator on both sides. I buy out all the old contracts and then I invite fresh contracts for the same site to get a better output at a lower cost. Now, when that is done, it is possible that this cost from the new wind farm may be marginally higher than what you would get for a new wind farm tender at a greenfield site. But a DISCOM should be willing to pay that extra price because wind power prices are so low that there is enough cushion for another 10-20% in those prices, because thermal prices are very high. And as we go forward, the price of coal will keep going up and so on. So in fact, there is another place where I make another argument of the state assuming a greater role, because the thinking we have absorbed from the West is that the only mechanism is the carbon pricing mechanism. We've imported it in India. And pricing will deliver results. Now, this is so big that pricing is not delivering results in the West. So if I want a green steel plant, I have to invite a bid for a green steel plant. Carbon pricing will not give me a green steel plant. And similarly for, somewhere I've suggested this, but it's important, that if we want to use the entire bio-waste in the country and use it into commercial energy, and the bio-waste is a renewable source of energy, the aggregation that is needed from all kinds of decentralized places in the villages can only be undertaken by a state-promoted body, which then outsources conversion of, say, rice straw into pellets or husks. But to expect private entrepreneurs to buy all the rice husks and convert into pellets, it won't happen. So I'm convinced that the problem of the winter spike in air pollution by the burning of crop fields will happen only if we take a deep breath, replicate the FCI kind of effort by buying the waste at a price which makes it profitable for the farmer. And then you can convert it into pellets and give it to power plants. The cost of coal with carriage is more or less similar to what you'd get from these pellets. Even if it's marginally higher, it hardly matters. After all, the price of coal keeps going up in all kinds of ways. But this will happen only if the state assumes the largest responsibility, which ideologically we have not been prepared to do, because we embrace the free market principle. So give a price signal here, a subsidy there, things will happen. And the faith in the free market and the carbon pricing, which act at the margin, has not delivered in the West. We've got 30 years of experience. So the West also has only moved when they take a big decision. So like Germany went very fast with solar power because they had a very attractive feed-in tariff. Or say have the stated intentions of California and Northern Europe by 2035, we will prohibit the sale of vehicles using internal combustion engines. Now we have taken another route which is working, but the fact is that we have to think of a route which has the critical mass to get the outcomes that we need. So I'm a pessimist on the effects of carbon pricing. At the margins, it will work. At the margins, it has worked in energy efficiency. At the margin, it will work in existing sectors. But if you want a real breakthrough, then you have to think big and act big.
Just on a lighter note, so the states will have to do a lot of work in this particular thing. And our experience has been that states don't move unless there's money on the table. That is something that was revealed in the ambitious program on village electrification and household electrification. So unless there's money on the table, the states don't move. This is just as an aside, sir. It has not...
I entirely agree with you that where necessary, government should be willing to put in money. The order of money required would be very modest. Because if you look at the solar mission, you put in the generation-based incentive. It's a big achievement persuading finance ministry to give that. But the final outflow was so little that you discontinued it or your successor discontinued it. So the key is to get the initial money in, get competitive forces working, create a competitive market and see how costs go down. And then you can always, use another policy instrument, which is to tax the traditional carbon emitting source to get the money to subsidize this or to levelize the prices. Those policy instruments are there with government. To some extent, government has used this with EVs. So the excise or GST on EV is, I think, 5%. For cars, it is 28%. So that kind of instrument is always available. It's a political call. as to what we can take for this product.
Can I make a provocative statement, sir? I know provocation is the last thing for Mr. Ajay Shankar, the least provocative man. But let me make a provocative statement. States are not going to move on your energy transition unless the government of India gives them the money.
Let me respond. On the hydrogen economy, I did not expect state government after state government to come forward with money on the table and ambitious programs. I thought the government of India will have to somehow run the program, but any number of states have, and what they've announced is listed in the book. And when renewable plus storage is cheaper, then why should any state electricity regulatory commission approve power purchase from a new thermal plant? So if what is being offered is cheaper, then the states don't need money. But where they need money to get something going or to kickstart something, surely government should put in money. And I would say just compare with the enormous amount of money put in for the PLI scheme. Or any other scheme. We talk of commitments of 1.5 crores, 1 lakh crores, 80,000 crores. And the book has numbers, I can fish it out and read it. But the total outflow from the budget on renewable energy is negligible. All invested by the private sector. And even in taking electricity to all households, the government expenditure is quite low. I mean, you compare those years with the aggregate losses of the DISCOMs, the outflow from the central government at 90% of the cost of taking electricity to every home is modest. So I think the central government has the resources and the capacity to put in whatever money is needed, and conceptually we should always be willing to put in money where it is needed. I mean, the argument I make is look for a least cost pathway. And the most important point is that you should look at life cycle costs of getting away from fossil fuels. So if you build a new LNG terminal or a new refinery or a new thermal power plant, all these have lives of 40, 50 years. And if you close them by 2070, please look at the cost of closure and the higher cost of doing something else today. And that's one of the major arguments of the book, is working out the net cost today of a new investment which has to be wound down if you have to become net zero, and the cost of something alternative. That's a major exercise which needs to be done sector after sector. I think this whole idea of getting the share of gas in our economy from 6% to 15% has become dated. It needs recalculation. And similarly, all investments in new LNG terminals, long-term contracts, need to be seen through the prism of the shift towards electricity in transport, the shift towards renewables, and the life cycle net present cost of closing a lumpy capital-intensive investment or managing with something else which may appear slightly more expensive now. It's not easy to do all that, but that's the kind of work and analysis which needs to be done. And done publicly, transparently, consensus could easily emerge on what is the right way forward.
One of the things that I noticed in your book was that you had almost completely ignored large hydro. And given the potential of large hydro, which is, according to the Central Electricity Authority, along with Bhutan, it comes to 157 gigawatts. And you, of course, mention the potential of pumped storage, which you say comes to almost 180 gigawatts, according to the CEA. Now, why is it that you have tended to ignore this large renewable potential? Because we always rely on large hydro to fulfill our renewable promises.
You're right. But the underlying reason was that I was trying to talk about things which need to be done. The country is committed to developing its entire hydro potential. And the Ministry of Power has many incentives and efforts on how to get all of them in position. So I didn't see the need for any policy prescription there. So yes, I have not said that the country should do what the power ministry is trying to do quickly, and which is to develop all the hydro potential in the Himalayas. That I have not said. But I didn't feel the need to go there because I had one difficult motivation, which is to make the book as slender as possible in the hope that people here would buy it and read all of it.
No, I was just mentioning it.
No, I'm in
because
agreement with you.
it has
On
an
large
important
hydro.
role in balancing on a very large
No, I
scale,
agree with you.
sir.
I don't know, I agree
So,
with you.
so we are looking at a perspective of almost half a century. 2070 is when
Just say something here. I think large hydro has a cost for the ecology because most of the hydro projects in the Deccan, in the plateau, have already been done. So what you have is basically the Himalayan ecology, and that is quite fragile. So storage dams per se have actually had a very adverse impact on the ecology in many areas. Bhutan per se as a country does not allow storage projects. What we do there are run off the river projects where they dam the river for a small portion and then recharge the water lower down, downstream. So there's a certain section of the river which kind of gets denuded where your power plant and everything will be, but it actually doesn't store the water. It just holds it up for a certain period of time and then redischarges it into the river. And they certainly will not go along with any large storage projects out. That's not their policy. Nepal has more potential, 80,000 megawatts of hydropower potential, but they are so fragmented that their ability, and they are also highly populated. So their ability to get the consensus going in their country to allow hydropower project cooperation with India is very fragile and may take years and years, by which time, as we've seen, decades have passed without projects being done. And so you may actually find that it becomes, dated by that time. So I think it's certainly a resource, but large hydro, I think, has its own issues. And the potential, because of the policies of our neighbors, or because of the politics of our neighbors, is not maybe to the extent that we think.
Ma'am, I'm only repeating what the CA has said. This is the Central Electricity Authority because Mr. Ajay Shankar has quoted extensively from CA. So I'm quoting from CA too.
Sir, I will add to it. Large scale, sir, I would like to also add. In large scale dams,
Excuse me. Please focus your questions on the author.
Author, yes.
The postscript has suddenly become.
Questions are leading you to your writing a book on large hydro.
Large hydro, so far as carbon markets are concerned, large hydros generate huge carbon credits. And the purpose of carbon markets is not the playing money, rather to reduce greenhouse gases, to make the planet more livable. So there is some criteria called additionality. So anything excess flow of credit makes the supply very high, reduce in cost of the price of the credits, and as an indicator of market failure. When China large scale, we at Bonn, UNFCCC, took care that in CDM, large scale hydros are not included. And so also in our MNRE, sir, you were there, and 25 megawatt up to small hydro, we have considered as renewable energy category. In India, so far as Panchamrit is concerned, we are telling non-fossil sources where large hydro we also consider for calculating our overall energy production, and there we consider large hydro as a renewable source. But there are other constraints, like Ma'am brought out the ecological side, and the carbon market failed from $196. Immediately the cost of the carbon credit
there are other reasons.
six cents.
There are other reasons also. Please understand, we have a major problem with water. Do you know that we are the most stressed, and the amount of water we are taking out from aquifers and groundwater is the highest in the world. It's US and China put together.
That is well established. Sir, I have a question to the author. Sir, it is a wonderful book in a very comprehensive manner, in a very small is beautiful, that's the principle. And you have very focused and maintained the consistency of thought, and tossed all the high points in the energy transition that is going on. So far as India's future scenario is concerned, how long the transition is likely to continue, and 2070 and all those are fine. But according to PM's vision, and there is many other, this thing, India is trying to become even achieve net zero much before, if we are able to. Like as you told, we in India, our policy has remained. We are certainly not the cause of the problem, but we are in the front in taking leadership towards the solution. So, so far as I would like to understand, sir, the future of the transition right from now, the kind of scenarios you are looking at your perspective, and particularly with a focus to nuclear energy.
May we take some more questions?
Sir,
I come from DHL, and I suppose I don't need the mic. I spent 39 years in the company DHL, and I have grown seeing you people, sir, Ajay Shankar sir, and you have been on the industry side also, and you were a part of the power sector. But at that point of time, we talked about thermal, we should go down, and the UMPP concept came. UMPP also could not go in the full scale. We only could bring 3 or 4 power projects there. After that, the supercritical technology was introduced in the Indian market, in the power sector. 2009, NTPC had come with a bulk tendering. All we did, the joint ventures were formed here in the country. So many people had come. And now in 2014 or 15, we started saying that coal has become a dirty word. But just see the irony. The industries which have come here, they set up their base here. And at the same time, the solar was going in a big way, the leapfrog, whatever was happening. And now we have even crossed that non-fossil, more than 50%, that has happened. But we even did not think of putting industry which will support our solar. All the things were being imported today also. And whereas if I talk about the thermal sector, it is all indigenized. If I say BHEL or L&T for that matter, you create those jobs in this country. But we even, there had been a policy failure. I'll not say policy failure, but we did not envisage that this problem is going to come. And now again, the coal is becoming a likable word, like a lovable word in the sense, again, we have something around 60,000 megawatt projects, which are in different stages of construction. Some are in construction stage, some are in tendering stage. What you feel, why this really, we had to face this problem? This I just would like to know from Shankar sir, please. Thank you.
related question, sir, because you had mentioned in your introductory remarks that you feel that our demand need not be based on thermal power only. And the point that the earlier questioner also made, that a lot of capacity has come in the last 1 year. For a while, there was no investment in thermal power in the country, but in the last 1 year, we see or a year and a half, NTPC and some leading power companies investing heavily in the thermal power, and BEL is also getting its order books are full. So, and the argument being given is that India's base load power will always be met by thermal power. So do you think that, negates the process of transition, or is it part and process of the transition, or will our renewable energy, non-fossil energy meet our base load power requirements?
But you sound to be quite optimistic of this energy transition. But if you actually see the signals that we are getting as of today, where your renewables are growing but not growing at the rate they should. We need to grow perhaps 3 times the rate that we are progressing right now. And we are going full steam ahead with coal. Every day we hear new figures. Today it's 50 gigawatts, tomorrow 60 gigawatts, then it's 70 gigawatts. And now we seem to have developed a new fondness for nuclear. And I feel we are now going ahead with nuclear, or especially in terms of SMRs, is because we have realized that renewables is not going to really help us get where we want to in terms of going net zero by 2070. And we have anyway conceded that till 2047, we are going to go ahead with coal for Viksit Bharat. So my question is, do you think you're being a little too optimistic by, let's say, hoping or assuming we'll reach net zero by 2070, or that the energy transition is on the right track?
One bit which is common is that a lot of new thermal is being developed. Now the rationale, because if you look from outside, what is the rationale? The rationale is that the Indian economy is poised to grow very rapidly. Electricity demand growth has been modest, and if we want to continue to ensure reliable power supply, then we need enough capacity, and therefore new thermal is required. So that's the rationale. Now we will debate on the numbers and so on and so forth. Now, the argument I have made in the book is that the cost of renewable plus storage makes a compelling case for not building new thermal. But that compelling case can be acted upon in practice only if you scale up the creation of solar power and storage capacities being at least 20-30% higher than the solar capacity that you are creating in any 1 year. So that's an exponential growth of storage. Now my optimism flows from the fact that there is one TERI study which has come out, and now MNRE has also endorsed that with different numbers. So an earlier assessment was the land in India permitted or enabled a solar capacity of a few hundred GW. Now this is about 4,000. And if you do agri-PV, then the entire agricultural land is available for solar power generation with modest capacity utilization. So then we haven't moved into our cities with any solar panels, covering roads or pedestrian paths and so on. So the solar power potential in this country is far higher than was earlier estimated. So for the foreseeable future, it is enough. Now in terms of storage, the cheapest storage today is battery storage. Now this is a global supply system. So far, responses to price bids have been very good. So in the near future, there should be no problem. But the other technology that is available and which we haven't started as yet is concentrated solar thermal with storage. Now this is a low-hanging fruit because you can put it up in Rajasthan and Gujarat where the large projects are. The same sunlight will give you concentrated solar thermal with storage, and then your transmission capacity will be utilized the way it is utilized for a thermal plant. So the transmission costs, real costs will come down. So this is something that I have advocated, that we need to start a concentrated solar thermal program with storage very rapidly. Now coming to the issue of manufacturing. We have been, a little slow in realizing that we must become self-reliant in manufacturing on solar panels. So there is a PLI scheme, and pretty good progress in modules and cells. But in the book, I have argued that, and that argument applies not only to solar, but just about everything. The Chinese are the most cost-efficient, cheapest manufacturers of practically everything in the world. So if we want to make anything, we must be willing to pay a little higher price till we learn how to make it well and make it cheap enough. Otherwise, we should continue to meet our demand with cheap Chinese imports. So that's a political decision which the government needs to take. And the decision is simple. So if I am getting solar power at 2.5 rupees a unit, I have argued this in the book, you invite a tender, like a long-term PPA for electricity, that you set up a plant in India with full value addition. I will buy your entire product for the next 10 years at L1 price. And if the plant supplies solar panels in 28, 29, I will start buying from 28, 29, no matter what the price, as long as the bidding is transparent. And I keep repeating, it's a repeat of the solar mission approach. And you provide the investor land at a place, environment clearance, and it is energy intensive, so you do what was done in the old days with Bhakra and Rehand, that you gave very cheap electricity to the new unit. So if you gave very cheap electricity to the new unit, because it's a simple calculation, that if I give electricity at 5 rupees a unit, my cost of producing an ingot is this much, I bring it down to 2 rupees or 1 rupee, where will I go? So that kind of calculation, bids can be invited, and it will be difficult to get response, but the world is large enough, our firms are smart enough, and give them enough time to bid. And then you will achieve the breakthrough. Now, in concentrated solar thermal, it's pretty simple. It's a thermal turbine and mirrors, and getting mirrors made in India is not difficult. So, but government has to take a call that we've had a very good run in getting cheap renewable energy. Now the time is to make the equipment in India and be prepared to pay a little more. So instead of 2.5 rupees, it becomes 3.5, 4 rupees. India can absorb it. So that's the way to go. And that answers your manufacturing issue. Now there is the question of nuclear and SMRs. Now, but before that, let me come to the other point. There is a view in our system saying that we have no option but to burn coal till 2070. So that means that the Prime Minister's commitment and India's commitment to net zero is not real. I don't believe it is not real. What we are saying in a very minor level here is what has happened in the West. That incumbents do not want to change. So I'll take an example in the West. I'm one of the big energy companies, oil companies. Now my company will disappear like BlackBerry disappeared if we go to net zero. So I will fight and resist as well as I can. I'll use all the money, persuade Trump that this is not science, etc., etc. So that political economy dimension in a minor way will play here. Because, I mean, say NTPC. It has to become a green energy company, stop building new thermal power plants. Coal India has to accept that someday coal mining will end in this country. All our oil companies, Oil India, GAIL, etc., have to look at becoming green energy companies or disappearing. Now, these are very big issues, not easy to think about, but till we think about it, and that's what I argue in the book, then you are not serious about becoming net zero. And I don't think we are not serious about net zero. I think we mean it, we can do it, and as I've argued, in attempting to become net zero, we'll become a better developed economy and faster developed economy. So that's the big thing. So you are right that this book is tough.
Sir, just one clarification. Net zero doesn't mean that we will stop using coal or the fossil fuels. Net zero means we will have a balancing there, so that whatever the carbon is being generated, it can be compensated or it can be offset by some other this thing. We never meant this that the carbon is not going to be there, that coal is not going to be there.
This is the argument of the fossil fuel companies of the West, that we will somehow capture carbon, we will somehow store it, we will somehow use it. I have gone in a delegation to the United States in 2001. We committed to be partners in the first carbon-free thermal power plant we gave the Americans $1 million as a gesture of our goodwill. The plant was never built. And if you do the arithmetic of the planet, there is no way the carbon emission that is taking place can be stored under the Earth's surface. So carbon capture, use, storage can be solutions only at the margin, and that too at a very modest way. And that's the case I make in the book, and please read it. Because the arithmetic just doesn't add up. So the Germans were the first to build a 20 megawatt pilot project using carbon capture and storage. And they decided that the German countryside will never permit greater storage, so they gave it up. So I mean, we have to think very hard that either we want to survive as a species, and therefore we have to give up the use of all fossil fuels, or we can continue partying the way Mr. Trump is.
Any other questions?
Now, one more you had said on nuclear. Let me speak on nuclear. I am not persuaded personally, though I have not said in the book, that SMRs are something which is being very aggressively sold to us as a solution. Now, if you look at thermal power, we went from 200 megawatts to 500 to 800. Why? Because of economies of scale. The cost of per unit actually becomes lower. And it's true of all industrial production. And we have moved from 200 megawatt in nuclear to 500 and now 700. So the same economies of scale apply there. We have a very good, robust, all India integrated grid. So I am not being able to see the rationale of an SMR which is small. I have not seen numbers saying that the cost per unit will be lower than what is there in the country from existing nuclear. I am also not aware whether the SMRs have been installed anywhere in the West. And I personally would be very reluctant that first SMR be installed in India. I mean, let those who are designing it in America or England put it in place somewhere there and then let us get it. And so that's my personal view. But nuclear is not my area of greater understanding. But as nuclear grows, the fact is that nuclear is a carbon emission-free source of electricity. In the old days, the French managed 70% of the electricity supply with nuclear. And in the early days when we were talking to international interlocutors, I'd say, why have you done, brought into position two principles? One, no more hydropower development on the planet, and no nuclear. Then those days solar had not succeeded. So I said, how will you ever get to net zero? Now solar has succeeded. But those days it was nowhere. I'm talking of around 2000, late 90s. So I felt that the international system was a bit woolly in its thinking, saying that no hydro, while the planet had developed only 15% of the hydro potential, while Norway had developed 90% and Canada 90%, and nuclear should not be built at all. So then how do you stop the use of fossil fuels? And again, part of it, I think, is the political economy of the power of the energy companies. And that is something we don't try to understand. So like if you look at the international discourse, as individuals we must become responsible. So we stop using paper, or we say we will become Gandhian and go in some village and, live with Mother Nature. Some of us can do it, but society will not do it. And if you want a solution at the macro level, there is government policy that has to drive change. And in the West, they have to confront the money power and the influencing power and the communication power of the large fossil fuel companies.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, you have discussed CSP in the book, and the technology in the CSP has been advanced, you have mentioned. And a number of CSP plants have come up in the Middle East and in some Western countries. So is CSP a better option than solar PV plus storage, economically and operationally? If so, then why it is not getting popular in India? And my second question is that though there has been impressive improvement in the installed capacity in terms of installed capacity, but a common citizen is not concerned about the RE capacity addition. What has been the trend of emission intensity in the power sector, the CO2 emissions per kWh over the years? How they are declining? Are they declining or they are at a plateau?
you and I need to persuade decision makers that we have been very slow in setting up CSP. And CSP plant is working in India. The solar mission began, there was a tender for CSP, and 150 megawatt plant is working very well and generating good money. So, and the Dubai plant is working well, and the advantage of CSP would be that where our large solar projects are there, these can come up there and the transmission cost will come down because transmission capacity utilization will go up.
What is it better than solar PV plus?
I'll come to that. Our needs are so large, if we are to really stop building thermal power plants, which we should, then I think we need to pursue all options. So CSP, solar PV, decentralized solar, solar pumps, and village level solar, micro solar, battery storage, pump storage on rivers, pump storage off river. I think we need to pursue all of it, and policy must accept that each of these there will be some difference in prices. But all their prices are so attractive that whichever one you use, renewable plus storage is cheaper than new thermal. So I think as a system, we need to be willing to accept that we will have all of them and we'll pursue each one in parallel.
Rakeshji, one more
They are in the
point
book, so-
about CSP. Each CSP has to be planned individually. Each one. And you have to monitor the insulation over a period of time so that you know it. So there is much more effort required than solar PV. Solar PV is the easy option out. Ready-made, there's hardly anything. Concentrated solar power requires that much more effort and that much more...
There's one more question, let me answer. So our consumption will keep rising, production will keep rising, but per unit will keep declining. But the trends will emerge depending on the speed at which we scale up renewables plus storage. The other, you had one more point, I think, on the costs. So the costs are given in the book. There is a table on one page where pump storage plus solar is there, pump storage plus battery is there. And in CSP, the price achieved in Dubai is 7 cents a unit. So in India, it's bound to be lower.
Here as well, most of our thinking here as well as abroad has been around electricity generation. And electricity actually, in our present consumption patterns, only 30%. The other 70% is transport fuels, which is another 30, and 40% roughly is industrial heat. Now, your green hydrogen idea is absolutely the best, and I don't want to ask so much, ask a question so much as make a suggestion. You've talked about producing green hydrogen from bio waste. I think that's absolutely the best way to go. It's also the cheapest. There is an Indo-American company here in Delhi at this moment, which has been trying to get the Punjab government to accept a project for producing green hydrogen, and the price that they have said is $1.20 per whatever that unit is, as against the $6 that you and $4.80 that you suggest. I think that is a direction that I would strongly recommend.
I'm in full agreement. I'm arguing for that in the book also. In fact, my argument is one tender for green hydrogen from biomass, where the body agency inviting the tender takes the responsibility of aggregating bio-waste and providing it to the plant.
And one more thing, I think green hydrogen's real value will be in the production of steel, because that's where the blast furnaces we are running out of every other alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question there. You also have one question. Okay. Those are the two last questions. Yeah.
So,
Out of time, I think.
so sir, I'm quite a novice in this field, but actually there are certain doubts that I have actually very apt for this title itself in terms of rising ambition, because MNRE's vision also talks about we have crossed more than 250 gigawatts of non-fossil. There is, in the vision itself, they have mentioned that transmission upgrades and linkages for HVDC is something that needs to be worked about. And then there are three separate things that I wanted your opinion on. First was for renewables in itself. A lot of industries have talked about right-of-way and land tenureship to be a major and a significant hurdle. Do you think in this specific aspect, offshore, specifically offshore wind, because we do have our offshore wind policy, and that is also something that is being looked upon quite a lot. So there is some scope in terms of energy transition from that space. And also for solar, in specific, you had talked about repowering for wind turbines. But what about solar cells and their end of life and materiality burden? Because they are a huge e-waste. Post their operation, what about these cells that are being required? What would we actually do with them? All of these are something that I really think about a bit more.
I'll combine. So we'll end with.
Sir, we are talking of generation, and transmission is also a big issue, and there is big loss in transmission. Now it is being said that in case of transmission, like we have a mobile internet, can we do this type of transmission like this also?
So to your question about transmission, it's a technical issue. We have an expert here outside, you can ask him, because I'm not aware, so I can't answer your question. But coming to your questions, it would be misleading to suggest that the journey ahead will have no problems or no challenges. There will be enormous problems, enormous challenges, and people who would be taking decisions both outside government, in government, private firms, will have to struggle with many issues. This lays out a broad picture. The government itself has announced a program for offshore wind development. So there are many things in the pipeline. So this tries to give a optimistic picture that we can achieve net zero, we can afford it, and we can do it almost as fast as anybody else in the world, and in the process we'll become a better developed economy.
Thank you. We can have the rest of the discussions informally. You see, in the health sector, there is a concept called blue zones. Blue zones are where people live more than 100 years. And net zero seems to be something like that, but the difference is that here there is an official state commitment to achieve that, which is not in the case of blue zones. And what Mr. Ajay Shankar's book does is to provide a roadmap. Now, but these are subject to certain things. One, there are global uncertainties, given the kind of leadership you see in countries like United States. Second, are we going to see the same commitment over the next 45 years with regard to this, particularly at a time when we are facing a lack of national consensus on critical issues? That is one thing. Another aspect is while the cooperative federalism that the Prime Minister spoke about certainly would contribute to this, but given the current state of relations between particularly the center and the opposition ruled states, as you may see, are we going to see the same kind of coordination when it comes to achieving net zero objectives? And last but not the least, I believe, which as a student of communication I feel is very important, is the public participation part. Because no policy can succeed without public. Ambassador Meera Shankar referred to the problems in Nepal. And I think that this public participation, and particularly behavioral change, you have under the Swachh Bharat toilets which were built, which were turned into storerooms, and people continued to go for open defecation. So you see when land is acquired for airport or highways, the first thing that they do is to go for SUVs, diesel SUVs. That's the first, you see the tendency is to go for that, not for electric vehicles. So are we going to change this consumerist pattern? So a lot would depend on the communication, the public participation, I would say the awareness that is also important. All in all, I believe that today's book discussion has certainly triggered a train of thoughts, and I'm sure that this would be the beginning of a debate we would see all over. I wish there are more such discussions across the country on this, and Thank you, Mr. Ajay Shankar, for agreeing to participate in the IHC conversation with authors. And thank you, Mr. Pradhan, for moderating such a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you. And the Habitat Center.
Thank you so much, sir. I also want to thank you on behalf of India Habitat Center. We would like to thank Shri Ajay Shankar ji, Shri Gireesh Pradhan ji, and Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh for a very serious, rich, and insightful book discussion on the various aspects of India's energy transition. We thank the audience for their wonderful participation and thoughtful questions. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And we request all of you, those who have not entered their details, please enter it outside. It will help us in sending you invites for similar such events in future. Thank you so much.